The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted her uniform one final time before entering the briefing room. At 32 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from 15 years of military service, yet she knew that today would test every ounce of that confidence. The Joint Special Operations Command had selected her for an unprecedented assignment, one that would place her directly in the path of some of the military's most elite and, traditionally male-dominated units. Sarah's journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Growing up in a small farming town in Nebraska, she had been the daughter of a Vietnam veteran who taught her that respect was earned, not given. Her father, Robert Mitchell, had instilled in her the values of hard work, perseverance, and never backing down from a challenge. These lessons had served her well throughout her naval career, propelling her through the ranks faster than many of her male counterparts. The briefing room door felt heavier than usual as she pushed it open. Inside, 25 of the Navy's finest SEALs were already seated, their conversations dying down as she entered. The room smelled of coffee and the faint trace of gun oil, a combination that had become familiar to Sarah over the years. She noticed the way their eyes followed her as she made her way to the front of the room, some curious, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Thompson, a 15-year SEAL veteran with muscles that strained against his uniform, was the first to speak. His voice carried the gravelly tone of someone who had spent years shouting orders over the sound of gunfire and helicopter rotors. Well, what do we have here?" he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Looks like the brass decided to send us a desk jockey to tell us how to do our jobs." The comment drew snickers from several of the men in the room. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before any confrontation, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had faced this kind of reception before, though never quite so publicly or with stakes this high. The assignment she was about to brief them on could change the course of several ongoing operations in the Middle East, and she knew that earning their respect was crucial to its success. "Good morning, gentlemen," Sarah said, her voice steady and professional as she reached the front of the room. She placed her briefcase on the table and began removing the classified documents that would form the basis of her presentation. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, and I'll be briefing you on Operation Silent Thunder today." Master Chief Thompson leaned back in his chair, crossing his massive arms over his chest. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander," he said, emphasizing her rank with obvious sarcasm, "exactly how much time have you spent in the field? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who spent more time pushing papers than pushing through enemy territory." The room grew quiet, and Sarah could feel the weight of 25 pairs of eyes on her. This was the moment she had been preparing for, though not in the way she had expected. She had anticipated questions about the operation, challenges to her tactical decisions, even skepticism about the intelligence they would be acting on. But this was different. This was a direct challenge to her authority and her right to be in that room at all. Sarah set down the document she had been holding and looked directly at Master Chief Thompson. She had learned long ago that backing down from a bully only encouraged them to push harder. "Master Chief Thompson, isn't it?" she said, her tone remaining professional despite the tension in the room. "I've spent the last 8 years coordinating special operations throughout the Middle East and Southeast Asia. I've planned and executed over 40 successful missions, including several that saved the lives of SEAL teams when their original plans went sideways." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "But you raise an interesting point about field experience. Tell me, when was the last time you successfully coordinated a multi-unit operation involving Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and CIA operatives across 3 different time zones while maintaining operational security and adapting to real-time intelligence updates?" The Master Chief's face began to redden, but Sarah wasn't finished. "Because that's exactly what I did last month when your unit was extracted from that compound in Syria." "The extraction plan you followed?" "I wrote it." "The intelligence package that kept you from walking into an ambush?" "I compiled it." "The backup landing zone that saved your lives when the primary site was compromised?" "I selected it." A murmur went through the room as several of the SEALs began to piece together what she was saying. They remembered that mission, remembered how everything had gone wrong until someone had provided them with updated intelligence and a new extraction plan that had appeared almost like magic when they needed it most. Master Chief Thompson's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, another voice spoke up from the back of the room. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Rivera, a younger SEAL with sharp eyes and a reputation for asking good questions, leaned forward in his chair. "Ma'am, are you saying you were running operations support for the Syrian extraction?" Sarah nodded. Among other things, yes. That operation required coordination between multiple agencies and units, real-time intelligence analysis, and the ability to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. It's the kind of work I've been doing for years, and it's exactly the kind of expertise you'll need for Operation Silent Thunder. She turned back to Master Chief Thompson, who was now noticeably quieter than he had been moments before. So to answer your original question, Master Chief, I may not have spent as much time rappelling out of helicopters as you have, but I've spent plenty of time making sure that when you do rappel out of those helicopters, you land in the right place, at the right time, with the right intelligence to complete your mission and come home alive. The room had grown completely silent now, and Sarah could see that she had the full attention of every man in the room. She had turned what started as an attack on her credentials into an opportunity to establish her expertise and her value to their operations. It was a skill she had learned through years of proving herself in a male-dominated field, and it had served her well once again. But she could see in Master Chief Thompson's eyes that this confrontation was far from over. Men like him didn't back down easily, especially when they felt their authority or expertise was being challenged in front of their peers. She knew that he would be looking for another opportunity to test her, to find some way to prove that she didn't belong in their world of elite operators and high-stakes missions. Sarah turned her attention back to the room as a whole, opening the first classified folder and activating the presentation screen. Now, if we're ready to proceed, Operation Silent Thunder represents one of the most complex missions our forces have been asked to undertake in the past 5 years. It will require precision, adaptability, and flawless coordination between multiple units operating in hostile territory. As she began to outline the mission parameters, Sarah noticed that the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The open hostility had been replaced by something closer to professional interest, though she could still feel the undercurrent of skepticism from some quarters. She knew that earning their complete trust would take more than one well-delivered comeback, but it was a start. The mission she was about to describe would take them deep into enemy territory to recover a captured intelligence asset whose information could prevent a major terrorist attack on American soil. It was the kind of high-risk, high-reward operation that SEALs lived for, but it would also require them to trust in intelligence and planning provided by someone they had just met. Over the next hour, Sarah walked them through every aspect of the operation, from the initial insertion to the extraction plan, addressing questions and concerns with the kind of detailed knowledge that came from months of careful preparation. She could see the gradual shift in their attitudes as they realized that her briefing was unlike anything they had received before. Every contingency had been considered, every possible complication accounted for, and every piece of intelligence verified through multiple sources. By the time she finished the formal presentation, even Master Chief Thompson was asking tactical questions rather than challenging her authority. But Sarah knew that the real test would come later, when they were in the field and lives depended on the accuracy of her intelligence and the soundness of her planning. As the SEALs filed out of the briefing room, discussing the mission among themselves, Petty Officer Rivera approached her. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say that was one hell of a briefing. I've been on a lot of missions, but I've never seen one planned out to that level of detail." Sarah smiled, appreciating the young SEAL's honesty. "Thank you, Petty Officer Rivera. This mission is too important to leave anything to chance." As Rivera walked away, Sarah began packing up her materials, knowing that she had won an important battle but that the war for respect and acceptance was far from over. Master Chief Thompson had remained notably quiet during the latter part of the briefing, but she could see in his eyes that he was still evaluating her, still looking for weaknesses. The door to the briefing room opened one more time, and Sarah looked up to see Master Chief Thompson standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and Sarah wondered if he was going to make another attempt to challenge her authority. Instead, he stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, his voice lacking the sarcasm that had been present earlier, "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about you before I knew who you were or what you'd done." Sarah set down the folder she had been holding and looked at him carefully. "I appreciate that, Master Chief, but I understand why you reacted the way you did. You're protective of your men, and you want to make sure they're getting the best possible support. There's nothing wrong with that." Thompson nodded slowly. "Still, I was out of line. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've seen too many operations go sideways because of bad intelligence or poor planning. When I saw you walk into that room, I assumed you were just another staff officer who didn't understand what we do out there." "And now?" Sarah asked. Now I'm thinking that maybe we've been getting the wrong kind of support all these years, Thompson replied. The level of detail in that briefing, the way you anticipated every possible problem we might face. I've never seen anything like it. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction, but she kept her expression neutral. The mission is too important for anything less than perfection, Master Chief. Your men deserve to have every possible advantage when they're putting their lives on the line. As Master Chief Thompson left the briefing room, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had faced down their skepticism and proven her worth, but she knew that the real test was still to come. In 48 hours, those SEALs would be inserting into hostile territory, relying on her intelligence and her planning to keep them alive and help them complete their mission. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders as she finished packing her briefcase. 25 lives would be depending on her work, and failure was not an option. But, for the first time since receiving this assignment, Sarah felt confident that she had the respect and trust of the men she would be supporting. As she walked out of the briefing room and into the bright morning sunlight, Sarah Mitchell knew that she had just taken the first step toward proving that expertise and dedication mattered more than gender or preconceived notions about who belonged in the world of elite military operations. 2 days had passed since the briefing, and Sarah found herself in the Joint Operations Center at 3 a.m, surrounded by banks of monitors displaying real-time satellite feeds, radio communications, and tactical data from the field. The caffeine from her fourth cup of coffee was beginning to wear off, but she couldn't afford to show any signs of fatigue. In 6 hours, the SEAL team would begin their insertion into hostile territory, and every detail of their mission depended on the intelligence she had gathered and the operational support she would provide. The JOC hummed with activity despite the early hour. Intelligence analysts worked at their stations, updating threat assessments and monitoring communications intercepts. Technical specialists fine-tuned the satellite links that would keep the team connected to their support network. And, at the center of it all, Sarah coordinated the dozens of moving pieces that would need to work in perfect harmony for Operation Silent Thunder to succeed. Commander Patricia Hayes, the JOC duty officer, approached Sarah's station with a fresh intelligence update. Commander Hayes was a 20-year Navy veteran who had worked her way up through the intelligence community, and she had been one of Sarah's strongest supporters when the assignment for Operation Silent Thunder had been announced. Sarah, we just received an updated satellite pass over the target area. There's been some movement around the compound that wasn't there yesterday. Sarah immediately pulled up the new imagery on her main monitor, studying the thermal signatures and comparing them to the baseline they had established during weeks of surveillance. What she saw made her stomach tighten with concern. 3 new heat signatures on the perimeter, and it looks like they've repositioned the guards at the main entrance, she murmured, her mind already racing through the implications for the mission plan. Could be nothing, Commander Hayes said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe that any more than Sarah did. Maybe just a routine security rotation. Sarah shook her head as she pulled up additional camera angles and began cross-referencing the new information with their intelligence database. No, this is deliberate. Look at the positioning. They've created overlapping fields of fire that weren't there before, and they've moved the guard posts to cover the approach routes our team was planning to use. She began typing rapidly, pulling up the original mission plan and running calculations on alternative approaches. Commander, I need to contact the team leader immediately. If they proceed with the original insertion plan, they'll be walking into a trap. The secure communication line to the forward operating base crackled to life as Sarah established contact with Master Chief Thompson, who was serving as the team leader for this mission. His voice came through clearly despite the distance and encryption. Operations Center, this is Team Leader. We're 30 minutes out from insertion point. Request final go or no-go. Sarah took a deep breath before responding. Team Leader, this is Operations. We have new intelligence that requires immediate plan modification. The target compound has been reinforced since our last surveillance pass. I'm uploading the updated imagery now. There was a pause before Thompson's voice came back over the radio, and Sarah could hear the tension that had crept into his tone. Operations, are you certain about this intelligence? We've been planning this insertion for weeks, and any last-minute changes significantly increase the risk to my team. I understand that, Team Leader, but the threat assessment has changed significantly. The enemy has repositioned their guards to cover your planned approach routes. If you proceed as planned, you'll be exposed to hostile fire from multiple positions before you even reach the compound. Sarah could hear muffled voices in the background as Thompson consulted with his team. When he came back on the radio, his voice was carefully controlled. Operations, what's your recommended alternative? This was the moment Sarah had been preparing for throughout her career. The lives of 25 elite operators depended on her ability to analyze complex intelligence and provide them with a plan that would allow them to complete their mission and return home safely. She pulled up the tactical map and began outlining her alternative approach. Team leader, I recommend a modified insertion using the drainage system that runs along the eastern perimeter. Our thermal imagery shows no hostile presence in that area, and it provides concealed approach routes to within 50 meters of the target building. The extraction would need to be modified as well, but I've already coordinated with the helicopter support team for the new pickup zone. The radio remained silent for several long seconds before Thompson's voice returned. Operations, that drainage system wasn't in our original reconnaissance. How do we know it's secure? Sarah had anticipated this question and had already pulled up the relevant intelligence files. Team leader, I had satellite surveillance conducted on that route for the past 72 hours. No hostile activity, and the structural integrity has been confirmed through ground-penetrating radar. It's your best option for maintaining the element of surprise. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could imagine the intense discussion taking place among the team members as they weighed the risks of changing their plan at the last minute against the risks of proceeding into what appeared to be a prepared ambush. Finally, Thompson's voice came back over the radio. Operations, we're going with your recommended modification. Send us the detailed route information and updated extraction coordinates. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and increased pressure as she began uploading the modified mission parameters to the team's tactical computers. She had potentially saved their lives by identifying the change in the target compound's security posture, but now their success depended entirely on intelligence she had gathered and analyzed independently. There was no room for error. Over the next 4 hours, Sarah monitored the team's progress as they made their way through the modified insertion route. The drainage system had proven even better than she had hoped, providing complete concealment as they approached the target compound. Through the team's helmet cameras, she watched as they successfully breached the building and began searching for their objective. The intelligence asset they were looking for was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former CIA operative who had been captured while conducting surveillance on a terrorist cell planning an attack on American soil. The intelligence she possessed was time-sensitive and critical to preventing what could be the worst terrorist attack since September 11th. Operations, this is Team Leader, Thompson's voice came through the radio as the team moved through the compound. We've located the package, but we have a problem. She's in worse condition than we expected, and we're going to need medical support immediately upon extraction. Sarah was already coordinating with the medical team at the forward operating base before Thompson finished speaking. Team leader, medical support is standing by. What's her condition? She's conscious but weak. Looks like she's been tortured, and she may have internal injuries. We need to move fast. Sarah's mind raced through the extraction options. The original plan had called for the team to move to a pickup zone 2 kilometers from the compound, but Dr. Vasquez's condition meant she might not be able to make that journey. Team leader, I'm coordinating an emergency extraction from the compound's roof. Medical helicopter is inbound with a full trauma team. Operations, that wasn't part of the plan. The roof exposure increases our risk significantly. I understand, team leader, but given the package's condition, it's our best option. I've confirmed that the roof is structurally sound and large enough for helicopter landing. We'll have air support covering your extraction. As Sarah coordinated the emergency extraction, she could hear the tension in the radio communications from the field. The SEAL team was now operating in a situation that was completely different from what they had trained for, and they were depending entirely on her real-time intelligence and coordination to get them out safely. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Sarah's career. Through the satellite feeds and radio communications, she monitored every aspect of the extraction as the SEAL team moved Dr. Vasquez to the compound's roof while hostile forces began to converge on their position. The medical helicopter, escorted by 2 attack helicopters, approached through heavy ground fire that lit up Sarah's threat assessment displays like a Christmas tree. Operations were taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Thompson's voice was strained as he coordinated his team's defensive positions. How much longer until extraction? Sarah was in constant communication with the helicopter pilots, updating them on the tactical situation and guiding them through the safest approach route. Team leader, medical helicopter is 30 seconds out. Air support is engaging hostile positions to your south and west. Through her monitors, Sarah watched as the extraction helicopter touched down on the compound's roof while the SEAL team maintained a defensive perimeter. Dr. Vasquez was quickly loaded onto a stretcher and moved into the aircraft while hostile fire continued to impact around the landing zone. Operations, packages secure and loaded. We're lifting off now. Sarah felt a surge of relief as she watched the helicopter clear the compound and begin climbing toward safety. But her work wasn't finished. The SEAL team still needed to make their own extraction from the compound, and the hostile forces were now fully alert and actively hunting for them. Team leader, proceed to extraction point Charlie. Ground support vehicles are standing by. For the next hour, Sarah guided the SEAL team through a running firefight as they made their way to the alternate extraction point. Her real-time intelligence updates allowed them to avoid several hostile patrols and ambushes, but the situation remained dangerous until the team was finally recovered by armored vehicles and transported to safety. As the last radio transmission confirmed that all team members had reached the forward operating base safely, Sarah allowed herself to finally relax. She had not only identified a critical change in the mission parameters that could have resulted in disaster, but she had also successfully coordinated a complex real-time modification that had saved lives and ensured mission success. Commander Hayes approached her station with a smile. Outstanding work, Sarah. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone coordinate a mission modification that smoothly under pressure. But the real validation came 30 minutes later when Master Chief Thompson's voice came over the radio from the forward operating base. Operations, this is Team Leader. I wanted to personally thank you for the work you did today. Your intelligence updates and real-time coordination saved lives and made this mission possible. I owe you an apology for my initial assessment, and I owe you a debt of gratitude for the professional work you did today. Sarah felt a wave of satisfaction that went beyond personal vindication. She had proven herself in the most demanding circumstances possible, but, more importantly, she had helped ensure that 25 American servicemen would be going home to their families. Dr. Vasquez was receiving medical treatment and would soon be providing the intelligence needed to prevent a major terrorist attack. As she prepared to leave the JLZ after 18 hours of continuous duty, Sarah reflected on how dramatically the situation had changed since that first confrontational briefing. The skepticism and hostility had been replaced by professional respect and appreciation. But she knew that this was just one mission, and that she would need to continue proving herself with each new assignment. The real test, however, had been passed. Under the most extreme pressure, with lives hanging in the balance, she had demonstrated the kind of professional competence and dedication that earned respect in the special operations community. The gender barriers and preconceived notions that had seemed so important 2 days ago now seemed irrelevant in the face of Miss Ion's success and lives saved. 3 weeks after Operation Silent Thunder, Sarah found herself facing an entirely different kind of challenge. The successful mission had earned her recognition throughout the special operations community, but it had also brought unwanted attention from some quarters. She was sitting in the office of Admiral Robert Carlyle, the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, who had summoned her for what he had described as an important discussion about your future career trajectory. Admiral Carlyle was a legendary figure in the Navy, a former SEAL who had commanded operations in multiple theaters and earned a reputation as one of the most demanding and fair leaders in the service. His office walls were lined with commendations and photographs from decades of service, and Sarah felt the weight of military history as she waited for him to speak. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, the Admiral began, settling behind his desk with a thick file folder that Sarah recognized as her personnel record. Operation Silent Thunder was an unqualified success, and I've been receiving glowing reports about your performance from everyone involved. Master Chief Thompson, in particular, has been quite vocal about the quality of your work. Sarah felt a moment of pride at the recognition, but she could sense there was more coming. Admiral Carlyle's tone suggested that this conversation was heading somewhere she might not like. However, the Admiral continued, your success has created what some people view as a problem. There are those in the Pentagon who believe that putting a woman in such a prominent role within special operations sends the wrong message. They're concerned about the precedent it sets and the impact it might have on unit cohesion. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she forced herself to remain calm and professional. Sir, with respect, the only message Operation Silent Thunder sends is that competence and dedication matter more than gender. The mission was successful precisely because we focused on results rather than preconceived notions. Admiral Carlyle nodded slowly. I agree completely, which is why I've been fighting these discussions behind closed doors. But the pressure is mounting, and I wanted you to be aware of what you might be facing going forward. He opened her personnel file and began reviewing the documents inside. Your record is exemplary. Top of your class at the Naval Academy, distinguished service in intelligence, rapid promotion through the ranks, and now this success with special operations. Any reasonable person looking at your qualifications would conclude that you've earned your position through merit. But? Sarah asked, sensing that there was more to this conversation. But there's a group of senior officers who believe that integrating women into special operations roles is a mistake, regardless of individual qualifications. They're looking for any excuse to prove their point, and they see you as a test case. Admiral Carlyle closed the file and looked directly at Sarah. I'm telling you this because I believe you deserve to know what you're up against. There will be people watching your every move, hoping for you to fail so they can point to that failure as evidence that women don't belong in this environment. Sarah had suspected that her success would bring additional scrutiny, but hearing it confirmed by someone of Admiral Carlyle's stature made it real in a way that was both frustrating and motivating. What are you recommending, sir? I'm recommending that you continue doing exactly what you've been doing. Be better than everyone expects, work harder than anyone else, and never give them a legitimate reason to question your competence. The Admiral paused, his expression becoming more serious. But I'm also warning you that you'll be held to a higher standard than your male counterparts. It's not fair, but it's reality. As Sarah left Admiral Carlyle's office, she felt a mixture of determination and frustration. She had spent her entire career proving herself, only to learn that she would need to continue doing so for the foreseeable future. But she also knew that she was in a position to open doors for other women who might follow in her footsteps, and that responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. 2 days later, Sarah received orders for her next assignment, Operation Midnight Falcon, an even more complex mission that would require coordinating special operations forces from multiple branches of the military. The mission involved rescuing American hostages from a terrorist compound in a remote region of Afghanistan, and it would be the most challenging assignment of her career. The briefing for Operation Midnight Falcon took place in a secure facility that Sarah had never seen before. Representatives from Army Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Air Force Pararescue, and CIA Special Activities Division were present, along with senior officers from each branch. Sarah quickly realized that this was not just another mission briefing, it was a test of her ability to coordinate multiple elite units with different training, tactics, and command structures. Colonel James Harrison, an Army Special Forces officer with 30 years of experience, opened the briefing by outlining the hostage situation. We have 4 American civilians being held by a well-armed terrorist group in a compound approximately 200 kilometers north of Kabul. Intelligence indicates that the hostages are being moved frequently, making this a time-sensitive operation. Sarah had been studying the intelligence files for days, and she immediately recognized several complications that weren't being addressed in the colonel's overview. Colonel, if I may, she interjected, our latest satellite imagery suggests that the compound has been significantly reinforced since the hostages were taken. We're looking at a much more complex tactical situation than initial reports indicated. Colonel Harrison's expression suggested that he didn't appreciate being interrupted, especially by someone he had never worked with before. Lieutenant Commander, I'm sure the intelligence community has provided their assessment, but those of us with actual combat experience know that satellite imagery doesn't always tell the complete story. Sarah felt the familiar tension that came with being challenged by someone who assumed her gender made her less qualified. But she had learned from her experience with Master Chief Thompson that backing down would only reinforce their preconceptions. You're absolutely right, Colonel, she replied calmly. Which is why I've also coordinated with our human intelligence assets in the region and conducted signals intelligence analysis of communications from the target area. The reinforcements aren't just defensive positions, they brought in additional personnel with advanced training and equipment. She activated the presentation screen and began displaying the comprehensive intelligence package she had prepared. Based on multiple sources, I believe we're looking at a coordinated effort to use these hostages as bait for exactly the kind of rescue operation we're planning. The room fell silent as Sarah outlined the intelligence that painted a picture far more complex and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The terrorist group wasn't just holding hostages, they were preparing for a major confrontation with American Special Operations Forces, and they had been planning this scenario for months. Major Lisa Chan, an Air Force pararescue officer, was the first to speak after Sarah finished her presentation. Lieutenant Commander, this changes everything we thought we knew about this mission. If they're expecting us and prepared for us, we need to completely reconsider our approach. Master Chief Thompson, who had been selected to lead the SEAL component of the mission, nodded in agreement. The intelligence package is the most comprehensive I've ever seen for this type of operation. We need to take these threat assessments seriously. But Colonel Harrison wasn't convinced. All of this analysis is theoretical. In my experience, the best intelligence comes from boots on the ground, not satellite photographs and radio intercepts. Sarah had been expecting this kind of resistance, and she was prepared for it. Colonel, I appreciate the value of ground truth, which is why I've coordinated with local assets to provide visual confirmation of the intelligence we've gathered through technical means. She activated another screen showing photographs taken by local contacts who had been able to observe the compound without being detected. The images clearly showed the defensive preparations, additional personnel, and equipment that supported her intelligence assessment. Furthermore, Sarah continued, I've been in contact with the families of the hostages, and I've learned information about their captivity that wasn't included in the original intelligence reports. The terrorists have been making demands that suggest this entire situation is designed to draw American forces into a prepared killing zone. The room erupted in discussion as the various unit commanders began to grasp the implications of Sarah's intelligence analysis. What they had believed to be a straightforward hostage rescue mission was actually a carefully planned ambush that could result in significant American casualties if they proceeded with the original plan. General Patricia Morrison, the senior officer overseeing the operation, called for quiet and addressed Sarah directly. Lieutenant Commander, you're telling us that our entire operational premise is flawed. What are you recommending? Sarah had spent days considering exactly this question, and she had developed an alternative approach that would turn the terrorists' trap against them. General, I recommend that we use their preparations against them. If they're expecting a direct assault, we give them one, but not where they're expecting it. She outlined a deception operation that would convince the terrorists that American forces were preparing to assault the main compound while the actual rescue operation took place at a secondary location where intelligence suggested the hostages were actually being held. It was a complex plan that would require precise coordination and flawless execution, but it offered the best chance of rescuing the hostages while avoiding the ambush the terrorists had prepared. Colonel Harrison shook his head skeptically. This is getting too complicated. The more moving parts we add, the more things can go wrong. Sometimes the simple approach is the best approach. With respect, Colonel, Sarah replied, the simple approach is exactly what they're counting on. They've prepared for a conventional assault because they know that's what we usually do. If we give them what they expect, we'll be fighting on their terms. Master Chief Thompson spoke up in support of Sarah's analysis. I've worked with Lieutenant Commander Mitchell before, and her intelligence and planning saved lives. If she says they're prepared for us, then they're prepared for us. We need to adapt. The debate continued for another hour as the various unit commanders wrestled with the implications of Sarah's intelligence analysis. Finally, General Morrison made the decision to proceed with the modified plan that Sarah had proposed. But she also made it clear that the success or failure of the mission would rest heavily on the accuracy of Sarah's intelligence and the soundness of her planning. As the briefing concluded and the unit commanders began planning their respective roles in the operation, Sarah realized that she was facing the most significant test of her career. The mission was not only complex and dangerous, but it would also be closely scrutinized by senior leadership who were looking for any excuse to question her capabilities. But she also knew that this was an opportunity to prove definitively that her approach to intelligence analysis and mission planning could save lives and achieve objectives that conventional tactics might not be able to accomplish. The hostages' lives depended on her work, and she was determined not to let them down. Over the next week, Sarah coordinated the most complex operation of her career, working 18-hour days to ensure that every detail was perfect and every contingency was accounted for. She knew that there would be no second chances and no margin for error. The success of Operation Midnight Falcon would determine not just the fate of 4 American hostages, but also her own future in the special operations community. The night sky over Afghanistan was crystal clear as Operation Midnight Falcon moved into its final phase. Sarah stood in the Joint Operations Center, surrounded by monitors displaying feeds from drone cameras, satellite imagery, and radio communications from 4 different special operations teams positioned across a 50-kilometer area. In her earpiece, she could hear the calm, professional voices of elite operators as they prepared to execute the most complex hostage rescue mission in recent memory. Control, this is Wolfpack leader, came Master Chief Thompson's voice over the radio. He was commanding the SEAL team that would conduct the actual hostage rescue at the secondary compound. We're in position and ready to initiate on your command. Control, this is Falcon leader, Colonel Harrison's voice followed. Despite his earlier skepticism about the mission plan, he was now leading the Army Special Forces team that would conduct the deception assault on the main compound. Deception team is ready to commence diversionary action. Sarah checked her watch. It was exactly 0200 hours local time. Every element of the operation had been timed to the second, with the deception assault beginning precisely 15 minutes before the actual rescue operation. The timing was critical because it would take exactly that long for the terrorists at the main compound to alert their colleagues at the secondary location, allowing the rescue team to complete their mission before the hostages could be moved or harmed. All teams, this is Control, Sarah spoke into her microphone, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Operation Midnight Falcon is now active. Falcon leader, commence diversionary assault in 5 minutes. Wolfpack leader, commence rescue operation in 20 minutes. All teams acknowledge. The acknowledgements came back immediately from all 4 teams, and Sarah began the final countdown to an operation that would either vindicate her intelligence analysis and planning or potentially result in tragedy that would haunt her for the rest of her career. As the minutes ticked by, Sarah monitored the drone feeds showing both compounds. The main compound was a fortress-like structure with high walls and multiple defensive positions, exactly the kind of target that would require a major assault to breach. The secondary compound, located in a valley 12 kilometers away, appeared to be a simple farming complex with minimal security. But Sarah's intelligence analysis had indicated that this was where the hostages were actually being held, moved there precisely because it looked innocuous and unlikely to attract attention. Control, Falcon leader. Initiating diversionary assault now. Through her monitors, Sarah watched as Colonel Harrison's team began their assault on the main compound. Explosions lit up the night sky as breaching charges destroyed sections of the perimeter wall, and tracer fire began to streak back and forth as the terrorists responded exactly as Sarah had predicted they would. Within minutes, every terrorist at the main compound was engaged in the firefight, convinced that this was the primary American rescue effort. Control, this is Overwatch, came the voice of Major Chen from her position with the Air Force pararescue team. We have multiple cell phone communications between the main compound and secondary locations. The secondary compound is receiving alerts as predicted. Sarah felt a surge of validation as her intelligence analysis proved accurate, but she also knew that the most dangerous phase of the operation was just beginning. Wolfpack leader, you have confirmation that the secondary compound has been alerted. Accelerate your timeline by 3 minutes to maintain surprise. Roger, Control. Wolfpack is moving now. Through the drone cameras, Sarah watched as Thompson's SEAL team approached the secondary compound using the infiltration route she had planned based on weeks of surveillance and terrain analysis. The route took them through a dried riverbed that provided concealment until they were within 100 meters of the target building. Control, Wolfpack leader. We have visual on the target building. Infrared confirms 4 human signatures in the central structure, consistent with hostage locations. We also have 3 guard positions that weren't in the original intelligence. Sarah immediately pulled up the real-time thermal imagery on her primary monitor. Thompson was right, there were 3 additional guards that hadn't been detected in earlier surveillance. This was exactly the kind of tactical complication that could turn a successful rescue into a disaster if not handled properly. Wolfpack leader, I have thermal imaging on those guard positions. Uploading tactical overlay to your systems now. Sarah's fingers flew over her keyboard as she analyzed the guard positions and calculated the optimal approach routes for the SEAL team. Recommend split team approach using the livestock pen as concealment for the western approach, with Overwatch position on the ridgeline for suppressive fire. Roger, Control. Adjusting approach based on your tactical overlay. Sarah watched with intense concentration as the SEAL team split into 2 elements and began their approach to the target building. Every movement was precisely calculated based on the intelligence she had provided, and she found herself holding her breath as the operators moved through the darkness toward their objective. Control, Wolfpack leader. We're in position. Requesting final authorization for hostage rescue. This was the moment of ultimate responsibility. Sarah had spent weeks analyzing intelligence, planning the operation, and coordinating multiple teams. Now, for American lives depended on the accuracy of her work and the soundness of her decisions. Wolfpack leader, you are authorized for immediate hostage rescue. Control is standing by for emergency support. Roger, Control. Wolfpack is going active. The next few minutes unfolded with precisely choreographed violence as the SEAL team breached the target building. Sarah watched through their helmet cameras as they moved through the structure, neutralizing threats and searching for the hostages. The operation was proceeding exactly as she had planned, but she knew that success wouldn't be confirmed until all 4 hostages were recovered safely. Control, Wolfpack leader. Package 1 through Package 4 are secure and in our custody. All 4 hostages are alive and conscious. We have minor injuries but nothing life-threatening. Sarah felt a wave of relief so intense that she had to grip the edge of her workstation to steady herself. The hostages were safe, but the mission wasn't over yet. The SEAL team still had to extract from hostile territory while the diversionary assault continued at the main compound. Wolfpack leader, proceed to extraction point Bravo. Medical support is standing by. Falcon leader, you are cleared to disengage and move to your extraction point. Over the next hour, Sarah coordinated the complex extraction of both teams while monitoring the tactical situation to ensure that no hostile forces were moving to intercept them. The diversionary assault had been so convincing that the terrorists at the main compound continued to believe they were under the primary attack, allowing both rescue and deception teams to withdraw without pursuit. Control, this is Wolfpack leader. All packages and personnel are at the extraction point and ready for pickup. Control, this is Falcon leader. Deception team is clear of the target area and ready for extraction. Sarah coordinated the final phase of the operation as helicopters from both teams confirmed successful pickup and began the journey back to the forward operating base. Only when the last aircraft reported feet wet, safely out of hostile airspace, did she allow herself to fully process what had just been accomplished. General Morrison, who had been monitoring the operation from her position at the back of the JOC, approached Sarah's station. Outstanding work, Lieutenant Commander. That was one of the most flawlessly executed special operations I've witnessed in my career. But the real validation came from Colonel Harrison, whose voice came over the radio from the extraction helicopter. Control, this is Falcon leader. I owe you an apology and a debt of gratitude. Your intelligence analysis was spot on, and your tactical planning was brilliant. That deception operation worked exactly as you predicted it would. Master Chief Thompson's voice followed immediately. Control, Wolfpack leader concurs. The hostages are asking who planned this operation because they want to thank the person responsible for saving their lives. Outstanding work. As Sarah began the process of documenting the operation and preparing the after-action reports, she reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed since that first confrontational briefing room encounter. She had gone from being questioned about her qualifications to being praised by some of the most experienced special operations leaders in the military. But, more importantly, she had proven to herself and to everyone who had doubted her that excellence was not limited by gender or preconceived notions about who belonged in the special operations community. The 4 rescued hostages were living proof that competence, dedication, and innovative thinking mattered more than traditional assumptions about military roles. Over the following weeks, word of Operation Midnight Falcon's success spread throughout the special operations community. Sarah found herself being consulted on other complex missions, and requests for her expertise began coming from units throughout the military. The resistance she had faced from some quarters hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had been replaced by a grudging respect based on demonstrated results. Admiral Carlyle summoned her to his office 2 weeks after the operation for what he described as a career discussion that I think you'll find interesting. When Sarah arrived, she found him reviewing a thick stack of commendations and performance evaluations that had been submitted following Operation Midnight Falcon. Lieutenant Commander, the Admiral began, I've received more positive feedback about a single officer than I've seen in my entire career. Every unit that participated in Midnight Falcon has submitted letters recommending you for recognition, and several have requested that you be assigned to their future operations. He set down the papers and looked directly at Sarah. More importantly, the success of Midnight Falcon has silenced most of the critics who questioned whether women belong in special operations roles. You've proven that excellence transcends gender, and you've opened doors for other qualified women who will follow in your footsteps. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not just for her personal success but for the broader implications of what had been accomplished. Sir, I never set out to prove anything other than my own qualifications. But, if my work has helped change perceptions about what's possible, then, I'm honored to have played that role. Admiral Carlyle smiled. Well, you're about to have the opportunity to do much more. I'm recommending you for promotion to Commander and assignment as the liaison officer for a new Joint Special Operations Task Force. You'll be working with elite units from all branches of the military, and you'll be in a position to shape how these operations are planned and executed. As Sarah left Admiral Carlyle's office with her new orders, she knew that the challenges ahead would be even greater than those she had already faced. But, she also knew that she had proven herself capable of meeting any challenge through preparation, dedication, and the kind of innovative thinking that could save lives and accomplish missions that others might consider impossible. The transformation from being ridiculed for her rank to being celebrated for her expertise was complete, but Sarah knew that her real legacy would be measured not in personal recognition but in the lives saved and missions accomplished through her work. And, in the opportunities that would now be available to other women who possessed the skills and dedication to excel in the demanding world of special operations. 6 months after Operation Midnight Falcon, Commander Sarah Mitchell stood before the largest assembly of special operations personnel ever gathered in one location. The Joint Special Operations Conference brought together elite units from around the world, and she had been selected as the keynote speaker to discuss innovations in mission planning and intelligence integration. The irony was not lost on her that she was now being asked to teach the very people who had once questioned her right to be in their world. The conference hall fell silent as Sarah approached the podium. In the audience, she could see faces she recognized from dozens of successful missions: Master Chief Thompson, Colonel Harrison, Major Chen, and hundreds of other operators who had come to respect her expertise through shared experiences in the field. But, she also knew that there were others present who still harbored doubts about women in special operations roles, and this presentation would be her opportunity to address those concerns directly. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the large auditorium. When I first walked into a briefing room full of Navy SEALs 8 months ago, I was challenged not on the basis of my intelligence analysis or mission planning capabilities, but on my gender and my perceived lack of field experience. Today, I want to talk about what I've learned from those challenges and how they've shaped a new approach to special operations that has saved lives and achieved objectives we once thought impossible. She activated the first slide of her presentation, which showed a timeline of successful operations over the past year. Each mission had been more complex than the last, and each had been accomplished with 0 casualties among friendly forces. The common thread connecting all of these successful operations isn't the individual heroism of the operators involved, though their courage and skill cannot be overstated. The common thread is a new approach to intelligence integration and mission planning that treats every element of an operation as part of an interconnected system. Sarah advanced to the next slide, which displayed a complex diagram showing the flow of information and decision-making during Operation Midnight Falcon. Traditional mission planning often treats intelligence as a static product, something you receive at the beginning of a mission and then execute against. But modern threats require us to think of intelligence as a dynamic, continuously updated resource that can adapt to changing conditions in real time. She could see heads nodding throughout the audience as operators recognized the truth in what she was describing. How many missions had they been on where the original intelligence proved incomplete or outdated once they reached the objective? How many times had they wished for better communication with their support elements when things went wrong in the field? The success of Midnight Falcon wasn't due to perfect initial planning, Sarah continued. It was due to our ability to recognize when our assumptions were wrong and adapt accordingly. When we discovered that the terrorist group was prepared for a conventional assault, we didn't proceed with the original plan out of stubbornness or institutional inertia. We developed a new approach that turned their preparations against them. Master Chief Thompson, who was sitting in the front row, raised his hand. Commander, you make it sound simple, but that kind of real-time adaptation requires a level of trust between field operators and support personnel that isn't always present. How do you build that trust? Sarah smiled, remembering their first confrontational meeting and how far their professional relationship had evolved since then. Master Chief, that's exactly the right question, and the answer goes to the heart of why our traditional approaches to special operations need to evolve. She advanced to a slide showing communication patterns during various operations. Trust is built through demonstrated competence over time. When field operators know that their support team understands the tactical situation and can provide accurate, actionable intelligence under pressure, they're willing to accept recommendations that might initially seem counterintuitive. Sarah paused, looking directly at Master Chief Thompson. But that trust has to be mutual. Support personnel need to trust that field operators will provide accurate reports about changing conditions, and field operators need to trust that support personnel will use that information to provide the best possible guidance. When both sides are working toward the same goal with mutual respect, the results speak for themselves. Colonel Harrison stood up from his seat in the middle of the auditorium. Commander, I was skeptical of your approach initially, and I'll admit that my skepticism wasn't entirely based on professional considerations. But, after working with you on Midnight Falcon, I've become convinced that this kind of integrated approach is the future of special operations. What do you see as the biggest obstacles to implementing it more widely? Sarah had been expecting this question, and she knew that her answer would be carefully scrutinized by senior leaders throughout the special operations community. Colonel, the biggest obstacle is institutional resistance to change. We have 60 years of special operations tradition that has served us well, but the threat environment is evolving faster than our organizational culture. She activated a slide showing threat trends over the past decade: terrorist groups with increasingly sophisticated tactics, adversary nations developing new technologies to counter American advantages, and hybrid warfare that blurred the lines between conventional and unconventional threats. Our enemies are adapting and evolving constantly. If we want to maintain our edge, we need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions about how special operations should be planned and executed. General Morrison, who had been watching from the back of the auditorium, stepped forward to address the assembly. Commander Mitchell has identified something that we as senior leaders need to take seriously. The success rate of missions she's been involved with planning is significantly higher than our historical averages, and casualty rates are significantly lower. These aren't coincidences, they're the result of a fundamentally different approach to mission planning and execution. The general moved to stand beside Sarah at the podium. But I want to address something that hasn't been explicitly discussed today. Commander Mitchell has succeeded despite facing obstacles that most of you have never had to confront. She's had to prove herself repeatedly in ways that her male counterparts simply haven't. And yet she's never allowed those challenges to diminish the quality of her work or her dedication to the mission. A murmur went through the audience as General Morrison continued. The question we need to ask ourselves is how many other qualified people we might be overlooking because they don't fit our traditional expectations. How many innovative approaches to problem solving are we missing because we're too focused on maintaining the status quo? Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and discomfort at having her gender-related challenges addressed so directly. She had always preferred to let her work speak for itself rather than focusing on the obstacles she had faced. But she also recognized the importance of addressing these issues openly if the special operations community was going to continue evolving. General Morrison raises an important point, Sarah said, but I want to emphasize that the innovations we're discussing today aren't about changing special operations to accommodate different demographics. They're about improving special operations to meet evolving threats. The fact that these improvements might also create opportunities for people who have been traditionally excluded is a positive side effect, but it's not the primary goal. She activated her final slide, which showed a proposed organizational structure for future special operations task forces. What I'm recommending is a more integrated approach that breaks down the traditional barriers between intelligence, planning, and execution. When operators, analysts, and support personnel work as a truly integrated team rather than separate entities, the result is more successful missions and fewer casualties. The presentation concluded with a standing ovation from the entire assembly, but Sarah knew that the real measure of success would be whether her recommendations were actually implemented. Changing military culture was a slow process, and there would always be resistance from those who preferred traditional approaches. Over the following months, Sarah worked with units throughout the military to implement the integrated planning model she had described. The results were consistently positive: mission success rates increased while casualty rates decreased. More importantly, the approach began to attract talented officers and enlisted personnel who might not have been interested in traditional special operations roles. A year later, Sarah received orders promoting her to the rank of captain and assigning her as the commanding officer of the newly created Joint Special Operations Intelligence Center. It was a position that had never existed before, created specifically to institutionalize the innovation she had developed. She would be responsible for providing intelligence and planning support to special operations units from all branches of the military. On her first day in the new position, Sarah received a message from Master Chief Thompson, who was now serving as the senior enlisted advisor for Naval Special Operations. Captain, his message read, I wanted you to know that we're getting volunteers for special operations assignments from people who specifically want to work with your integrated planning model. You've not only changed how we do business, you've changed who wants to do business with us. The message continued. I also wanted to apologize again for my initial reaction when we first met. I made assumptions based on preconceived notions rather than giving you the opportunity to prove yourself professionally. It's a mistake I won't make again, and one that I've been working to prevent others from making. Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that first confrontational briefing room encounter. She had gone from being questioned about her right to be present to commanding the respect of the entire special operations community. But, more importantly, she had helped create an environment where excellence was recognized and rewarded regardless of who achieved it. The challenges hadn't disappeared entirely. There were still those who questioned whether women belonged in special operations roles, and there were still institutional barriers that needed to be addressed. But, the foundation had been laid for a more inclusive and effective approach to special operations that would benefit everyone involved. As Sarah settled into her new office, surrounded by monitors displaying intelligence from operations around the world, she knew that her greatest achievement wasn't personal recognition or career advancement. It was the knowledge that her work had saved lives, accomplished critical missions, and opened doors for future generations of military professionals who would be judged on their merit rather than their demographics. The transformation from being ridiculed for her rank to commanding respect for her expertise was complete, but Sarah knew that her legacy would be measured not in personal accolades but in the continued evolution of special operations toward a more effective, inclusive, and innovative future. She had proven that when barriers are broken down and excellence is recognized wherever it exists, everyone benefits, from the individual operators in the field to the broader strategic objectives they serve. The story that had begun with skepticism and confrontation had evolved into one of mutual respect, professional excellence, and institutional change. And, in the years to come, other women would follow the path Sarah had helped create, bringing their own unique talents and perspectives to the demanding world of special operations. The question was no longer whether women belonged in this environment, but how their contributions would continue to shape and improve it for generations to come.